Okay, hello everybody. Welcome to the SSK Cyber Club. For any new friends joining us today, SSK stands for Smarter, Safer, and Kinder Online. We started this club to talk about big issues and to build community around this very important topic. This episode of SSK is being sponsored by Kermode Education. Kermode is perfect for educators and parents who want to help set their kids up to be better digital citizens. By using cutting-edge software, Kermode helps users evaluate online content, build media and digital literacy skills, and flex their critical thinking muscles when consuming information online. This episode is being recorded, so you can always go back and watch it again on the Kermode Education YouTube page. I'm your host, Paige Whitson. I'm a team coordinator and project manager for a Kamloops-based software company. I also have 8 nieces and nephews, half of which are in their early years of their own digital citizenship. So they're getting into social media, they're consuming lots of YouTube, lots of Facebook. So I'm very excited to be joined again today by Sean Campbell. We're going to be talking about confirmation bias, which is perfect because my nieces and nephews, they're starting to consume a lot of other people's ideas, a lot of other people's beliefs. So really excited to dive into this topic. So welcome, Sean.
Hey, Paige, how are you?
Doing really well, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, excellent. So 8 nieces and nephews. That's a pretty good haul. Pretty big.
I know.
Yeah.
I had to count on my fingers, double check. I'm like, that sounds like so many, but there's 8. There's a whole gaggle of them.
That's interesting too. And are they using Facebook? Like I always think of young kids maybe using that's their dad, that's their mom and dad's internet, and they use TikTok and they use different things, but they're on Facebook, hey?
2 of them are, yeah.
Interesting. Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I always have seen social media as almost a shelf life. Like everything from MySpace, and then it went Facebook, and then it was Instagram, and then it was Snapchat, and then because I think each generation really wants their own space on there, and there's always new features that really cater to that next generation of kids. So that's interesting that they're still on Facebook. Facebook's still dominating, eh?
I know. I kind of think it might be like the bell bottoms of social media. It's coming back around now. It's back in style.
Yeah. I like it. That's awesome. Yeah, and thanks so much for having me back. I love talking about all of this stuff, and it's a pleasure to be here with you. And thanks so much to the team at Kermode for sponsoring this, because today we're going to talk about confirmation bias, and for my money, it is the most important concept for digital citizens, aka all of us, to understand. So I was wondering, Paige, are you familiar with that terminology? I know a lot of people are actually familiar with what it is, but is that something you think about and something you've heard of before?
Definitely something I've heard of. To be honest, it's not something that I very astutely think of or very cognizantly think of when I am online. But I feel like I have a decent grasp about what confirmation bias is.
Yeah, and you're not alone. I think that's fairly common where people have heard of it or they understand the concept of being in that information bubble. But we all have confirmation bias in us, and confirmation bias has been around for as long as humans have been around. This isn't an internet thing. It's just really interesting how internet companies use it to really control the information that we see. So for those of you out there who are unfamiliar with confirmation bias, so the dictionary definition of confirmation bias is the tendency to interpret new evidence as confirmation of one's existing beliefs or theories. So that's pretty technical. The way I tell people is, we as humans, we love being right. And we love seeing information that reaffirms what we already believe, and it's not bad in and of itself, but it can be insidious, and we're kind of seeing what's happening as we get all these information bubbles for everyone, and it goes beyond just being gravitating towards things I believe, because if we see things that go against what I already believe, I kind of just disregard that information. My brain instantly says, I don't know if that's true. I think those people are confused, or we just deny it altogether, or we forget about it. Whereas all the things we see that confirm what we believe, we remember it no problem. And unfortunately, what we're seeing is that these huge social media companies, these huge search engine companies, they have billions of dollars to spend on, behavioral scientists and machine learning and algorithms, and they're all there to make sure that as many people as possible are spending as much time on their platforms as possible. And confirmation bias has really played into that, really since the inception of all this, but we're seeing the effects now. And so when I find something I like, I click on it, I share it, I comment on it, I spend the time to read it, and all of these sites know that, and so they start feeding me more of it. And so I start thinking that everything I think is just bang on, and I can't understand why anyone would have a differing view than me, because it's so obvious that I'm right. And that's really problematic, right? Because we're like online, people yell at each other kind of constantly anyway. But now we're seeing it manifest in much bigger ways, in the US, across Europe, and it's having this big effect where we're not able to communicate with each other. We're not able to empathize with one another, because again, we're just so right, and it's so obvious because we're in this information bubble that's just feeding us what we like to hear. And unfortunately, sometimes it goes even further, where if I gravitate towards the extreme of an idea, that it starts to feed me those too, and it gets a little bit more extreme and a little bit more extreme. And that's where it starts to get a little bit scarier, where people are getting really extreme views or believing really far out things that aren't necessarily true or very much are not true. And the other problem is that a lot of these big issues that we're arguing about, they're very complex. There isn't really a right or wrong answer to a lot of them. There's just tons of gray area. And we get into these silos where it's like, no, I'm 100% right. This is the 100% right place to be. And that we lose our ability to communicate with one another and to empathize and see where everyone's coming from. And so I don't need to believe what you're saying. I can still think you're wrong, but I can have a much better understanding of why you think that way. And I think that leads to much more empathy. And unfortunately, with confirmation bias, I think we always think it's someone else's issue. Like I know what I know is right, and I'm good at the internet. I'm good at interneting, but then I have that crazy uncle on Facebook that has some real spicy views about, who knows what, right? And he gets on a soapbox on there, and he's amazing in every other way, but for this one thing, it's kind of painful, and we avoid it. We don't try to engage them on that topic. We don't talk about it. Paige, is there someone in your life, like on your social media world, your digital world, that you probably love them? They're probably lovely in every way, but they have something that they have some very strong beliefs about, and it's a bit cringeworthy.
Many people that I love very dearly, but sometimes I just have to snooze them for 30 days.
Yeah, and that's a great feature, right? I feel like I've done that a lot with Facebook, where I've kept them as friends, but shut them down for either 30 days or indefinitely. And that's one way to deal with it, really. So that's an amazing feature, and we can use it for that. What we see that less of is in Twitter and some of the other social media platforms. You don't have that same ability. Or even news aggregators, right? Like when we're getting our news from one source, whether it's online or even offline, it can really cater to one viewpoint, whether that's left or right or what have you. And so we really need to burst out of our bubble. And that's really my advice for this episode is I feel like I'm scaring everybody. Because like confirmation bias, really, it has profound impacts on us, right? Like it affects the way we vote. It affects the people that we're friends with. It affects our family. We argue about these things, right? And it affects like these democracy and like all these like really big ticket things that really, really matter. And I don't want to scare you with it, because I said this in the last episode too. I love technology. I think it has such tremendous value for bringing us together and sharing ideas. It's incredible. And so I don't want to leave you with, hey, confirmation bias is the worst thing ever, and you should all be terrified of going online. But we just need to be a lot more cognizant of what we're seeing and understand that everything that we're fed, it is probably tinged with some type of confirmation bias. And if we go into it with that lens, we can understand the things that we see much better, and we can start to ask really important questions like, what information is missing from this thing? Is this a snap judgment? That's a big one, where something happens or a political decision is made, or just something happens in the news. There's gun violence or what have you, and there's tons of snap judgments all over the place. And we really need to take a step back and say, okay, what information is missing? Assume that there's information missing, and put the effort in to find it and find another viewpoint. And that's actually really important. So we rely on Google and social media for a lot of things, right? Like Google filters a lot of information for us, and we just go to that first page and we're done. And what we need to really start doing is thinking, okay, well, Google isn't going to do this. Facebook's not going to do this. Social media is not going to do this. It's up to me to find a reasonable viewpoint from the other side of this contention. That's a me problem. I'm not relying on the internet for that. And I highly recommend you do it offline. Like you can do it online. There's definitely forums of reasonable people out there. But I found the most successful way is to go to someone I trust that may be on the other side of an issue. Even that person I think is kind of nutty online, but who I love to pieces. And I go and I say, hey, like, can you explain to me why you think this? Like, what information are you getting? And honestly, I'm not even going to talk. I'm not going to try to persuade you of anything. I'm just going to ask you a couple of questions, and then I'm going to go away and like process everything you said. And that really helped me. It really helped me to I didn't believe anything he said still, but it helped me really empathize with where he was coming from and why he was believing these things. And they weren't crazy. They were a really different viewpoint that I didn't agree with. Like, Paige, have you ever engaged with any of these people online? Like either online in a shouting match? I hope not. Because that happens too. Sometimes you're really passionate about something, and someone's like, "Oh, I'm against abortion," or "I'm for abortion," and that causes a tremendous amount of strife, right, between friends and family. So yeah, have you ever engaged with anyone online, either online or off?
Definitely not online. I think communicating about hot topics online is a very technical and also sensitive craft that's not my bag. I definitely got into, conversations with friends and loved ones about things where we have very different opposing views. And I feel very grateful that for the most part, it's always been very respectful and like, well, this is why I believe this thing and this is why you believe that thing. But it's, it is a muscle that you have to flex, being able to have those conversations and be able to hear someone else's viewpoint, someone else's perspective, ask about, what information has led you to this belief, and be able to like really take that and just hang on to that for a bit and just weigh it and see how it feels. And does that resonate? Am I willing to consider that might be true? There might be some truth in that. But it's hard to do, even as an adult. But so for kids, for the youth that are out there and they're being either confirmed, their own beliefs are being validated, and that feels really good, or they're coming up against these opposing views, if you will, and it's really easy to just be like, no, shut that down, get into the screaming match, or just block, delete. It's hot topic.
Yeah, and I think for kids it really is starting to just ask those questions. Like, hopefully they don't have to confront all of these huge issues all at once, right? Like that's problematic and difficult for anyone of any age. But if we can get them to start just asking these questions where, okay, I'm not just consuming these things that I get online because they are tinged with bias, right? Like not everything, like I'm not, again, trying to demonize it, but confirmation bias exists for a reason. It's very powerful. And to just recognize that, okay, I'm only getting one side of this big issue because I click on these things. It's important to know that, and to know that the person next to me who has a different view, when they find things online, it's the completely opposite view, and that's all they're being fed. And shout out to Cromoti. So like, thanks again for sponsoring this whole thing. But when you're using their analysis tool, it's built right in. So every time you do an analysis of a page, it has a confirmation bias element right there that's saying, hey, are you asking these questions? This is what confirmation bias is. It has tutorial videos about it. And it's just a 1-minute video where it says, hey, this is what confirmation bias is. Here are the questions you need to be asking. Discuss these questions with your group at school, with your parents, with your friends. And that really is the skill you're developing. It's just like you said, it can be really hard to talk about these things. And so let's practice listening. And I struggle with this too, where someone says something you think is so out there and you immediately want to jump on it. And you want to be like, oh, I read, like that's not a source. Come on. And I think a huge part of this is just listening, taking a breath, and almost taking a week or take a day or a month or whatever you need to just like take emotion out of it and just be like, okay, I get why you're saying that. Here's what I see. Like, here's what I think because of this. And I think that makes this a much better world. And if we could start to have those conversations online a bit more too, that would make our digital world a much happier place as well. So Paige, that's really all I have for confirmation bias. It's an enormous complex issue. But I think what I hope people get out of this episode is just that it exists, what it is, and then ask those questions. Always ask those questions. Always try to be patient with everybody. And always the emphasis is on you to find a reasonable argument from the other side of a contentious issue.
Totally. Yeah. Thanks, Sean. I think that's so important. And especially because online, the algorithms are built in such a way that if Facebook or Google notices that you're searching for certain things, it's going to say, oh, Sean is really interested in this one thing and this one take on that thing. I'm going to show him more. He doesn't even have to search for it. I'm just going to surface it right up to his feed, right to Google, right to the ads. So just being aware of, even when you're not looking for information to confirm your biases and your beliefs, the internet could very easily be feeding that to you. So just to, be just double checking and thinking and actively searching for the other side just to weigh things.
Absolutely. And it's so nice to talk to real humans on that front because, like you were saying, it's hard online, and I think it's almost impossible. Like I started to have a conversation just on WhatsApp with a buddy that I love to pieces, and it just there's no emotion there, there's no tone, so it just feels like you're fighting. Like there's no oh man, there's no laughter, there's no smile, there's no pat on the back. Where it's like, hey, we can talk about these things without getting upset and emotional. So I highly recommend hopping offline, at least to start as you're developing these skills, because that body language makes an enormous difference. And yeah, here's a test for people who aren't sure how confirmation bias would affect you. So when you're fed those things that you believe and feeds you more. So the other day I punched in some tennis lesson or something into YouTube, and that's probably 60% of my YouTube homepage now. And so you think of how obvious that is when it's something that, kind of doesn't have to do with anything else that I look for. The same thing goes for if I'm looking for information on vaccines or government officials or money or who knows what. Your feed will fill up very quickly because it knows that you're curious about that right now. And if you keep clicking on it, it'll just keep giving you more. There's no lack of information out there.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, YouTube's a great example of a social media tool that is great at confirming your biases.
Yeah, it's just really obvious. Maybe because it's visual. Oftentimes, if you have a news aggregator or social media, it just pops up just enough to keep you interested. Whereas YouTube, I felt like it was overwhelming. It knew I wanted to up my tennis game a big way.
Totally, yeah, because you make one search and all of a sudden now your homepage is just filled with tennis content.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's it for confirmation bias. I hope everybody learned a little something and integrates it into their digital citizenship class or family discussions.
Yeah, thanks, Sean. Super important topics. I'm glad that we got to touch on that a little bit. I know you also wanted to talk about some current events that you're excited to share.
I love bouncing back to current events because there is always something really positive happening out there, and I know we get stuck as everybody gets kind of stuck in all the kind of rough things that are going on out there. But I saw this and I really wanted to bring it up on the show today. Was Epic Games is the creator of Fortnite. And if you don't know what Fortnite is, your kids absolutely do. And it's just a very, very popular online game. And they decided to donate 2 weeks worth of revenue to Ukrainian refugees into a bunch of different organizations that are helping people in that conflict. And they raised $175 million in 2 weeks. And that is staggering. And that's food, that's transportation, that's housing for people who really desperately need it. Amazing, right? Like, it's amazing how much money they make, period. But it's like, I don't understand why more companies don't do that, in all honesty.
Yeah. I'm just 2 weeks of their revenue. That's a drop in the bucket, really. So, but kudos to them, because that is so much more than so many other companies are doing. So that's so amazing. That's wonderful.
Yeah, and you think about like how that is really tangibly helping people. Like in a really tough spot, that money that's an incredible amount of money that will make a huge impact. So kudos to Epic Games, big internet icon. Way to go, you guys.
Shout out to Fortnite. I don't know what Fortnite is, but
okay.
Like, all of my nieces and nephews, well, the ones that are older than 5, my nephew, he's 10-year-old nephew, loves Fortnite. And every time I see him, he's always telling me stories about Fortnite and describing the characters and how it works. And I do my best to keep up, but
incredibly popular game with the younger set. And amazing that they can make that much money, and amazing that they can pass it along. Like I think that's a serious question. Like, I wonder why more companies don't do that, especially tech companies, where I know a lot of tech companies actually lose a lot of money, like companies you think should make. Like Airbnb still loses money, and they're trying to gobble up market share. But 2 weeks, you feel like you could probably still keep the engine running and help a lot.
Totally.
And it's good press, right? It's like we're talking about it now. So it's good marketing too.
For sure. And hopefully other large companies and organizations that are in a financial place to do so will see that and follow their example.
Absolutely. Yeah, it'd be amazing. But yeah, that was the current event thing I saw.
I love that.
That's awesome.
Yeah, thanks, Sean. Cool. So yeah, just thinking about Fortnite and my nephew, and it just reminds me of a question that I know a lot of parents have. Because a lot of parents have kids that are playing the video games and they're on the YouTube, they're looking up tennis videos, probably looking at Fortnite videos more likely.
Yeah.
So how much screen time, I think is a question that a lot of parents have. How much Fortnite, how much YouTube, how much whatever, how much Facebook should I be letting my kids have each week?
Yeah, and it's a tough question. I get that question a lot. Parents wrestle with that quite a bit, because screen time's kind of amazing to kids. Like kids get locked in. It gives parents a couple minutes to kind of relax, and sometimes being a parent can be a struggle, especially with little kids. But then there's that guilt. You get that guilt feeling. So I do get how much screen time is too much screen time a lot, and obviously there's a million different factors, and your kids but a couple of the biggest ones are not all screen times created equal. Right. So there are a lot of educational games out there that are very engaging for kids. Like Prodigy is a great math game. Khan Academy Kids for younger kids is reading, phonics. There's math in there. There's social emotional learning. There's even physical literacy. Like they ask kids to get up and dance and act like monkeys or elephants and stuff. It's a fabulous. They're both free in a way. Prodigy wants you to pay more as you go through the game, but there is a free version. Khan Academy Kids. And so if your kids are engaged with games like that, I do think that's not as bad as watching anything with any type of like Transformers or, you know what I mean? Something that's like high energy, high violence or high movement, but then the kids aren't actively engaging with it in any way. And the other piece that I found really interesting was there's an article, which I'll put in the comments after this. I couldn't find it right before I came on here, but there was a study done, and if parents sat with their kids during screen time, it had no effect on their schooling a few years later. So they did this big study where kids would watch screen time alone for several hours a day, and then kids would sit with their parent and watch screen time for a few hours a day. And the kids who had watched with their parent showed no decline in their academic ability. And that's fascinating to me. So I think a big piece of that is that if your parent's there, you're probably still asking questions about things. You're not just sitting there consuming. You're saying, "Oh, Dad, why did that happen?" Or "Mom, why did that person react that way?" And so you're still getting that inquiry piece. You're still getting that social engagement with an adult instead of just sitting there zombie like, which is fine sometimes. I don't want to demonize screen time either. Like some parents do a lot better with a little bit of downtime than I would worry about the impact on your child having a half an hour of screen time. But it is interesting to note that they're like you just sitting with them and you can just relax, you can just have some downtime. That actually has a major impact on their scholastic abilities later on. And then just look for healthier alternatives. Just like if your kid is eating snacks, you can give them a big handful of cookies, or you can try to give them something healthier. I think that same thing goes with online. So instead of them watching movies, maybe they're doing Khan Academy Kids or Prodigy or what have you, or even drawing online. My guys love that. And it for whatever reason, they get sick of doing art time, with real life pencils and paper. They love doing it on the iPad. So, more power to them. They're going to be video game designers someday. Who knows?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So that's another complex question. I feel like every time I get a question on the show so far, I don't answer it as definitively as people want. They just want a yes or no, but it's more about unpacking it, right? It's just like online. It's not black and white. It's gray.
For sure. And that's great because those are really actionable items. Whether you need to let your kid, sit there while you're making dinner, and then you can give them these other options that are more engaging, more maybe more healthy for them, or maybe you just sit there with them, and then you can both just kind of veg out and zone out for a little bit. But
and it's kind of personally, it's just nice, right? They're usually snuggled in. It's like the one time a day they're quiet. It's kind of adorable. And so like I think some parents use it as a way to like, oh God, I've got to do the laundry. Like I've got all this stuff I have to do, and this is a nice way to keep them occupied. Try to take that time to hang out with the kiddos, at least for the start, or however much time you can spare. But that's a great question. I hope that helps some people. I know it's not as definitive, but there.
Wonderful. Okay, well, thank you so much, Sean. Today, this was great. Great to chat with you again and talk about all these important things happening in our lives online.
Yeah, Paige, I love it. Thank you so much for hosting again. I think these are valuable conversations, and I just really enjoy it. So thanks so much for having me.
Beautiful. Thanks, Sean.
Bye, you guys.
Okay, well, thanks so much, everybody, for tuning in and coming back and watching this with us. Join us next month for our next SSK Cyber Club. It will be on Wednesday, May 11th at 7 p.m. Eastern Time or 4 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. And subscribe to Kermode YouTube channel to keep up to date with our show and all the awesome updates from our friends over at Kermode. Also to go back and watch any previous episodes that you missed. And if you would like more information on Kermode and how it can help you, your family, your school, or your public library become smarter, safer, and kinder digital citizens, contact their team at info@kermodeeducation.com or visit them at www.kermodeeducation.com. Thanks for joining us, everybody, and we will see you next month.